We will begin the webinar shortly. All right. My name is Sharon Roberson. I'm President and CEO of the YWCA Nashville Middle Tennessee. I am thrilled today that you have joined us for our Stand Against Injustice Lunch and Learn, because this is a very critical topic, closing the gap, women's financial empowerment. We have a stellar panel that will give you various ways of viewing this issue. And as always at the YWCA, we invite you, we don't indict you, we invite you to these critical conversations. Also, I want to let all of you know that this month we are also holding our annual Racial Justice Challenge, and that is presented by the Harness Foundation. If you have not been receiving the emails, this is providing you on a 21-day challenge, critical information that will help you understand some of the dynamics of the issues involving racial justice. This opportunity was presented to us today by the Nissan Foundation, AllianceBernstein, and of course the Harness Foundation. We thank these organizations for stepping into that place to allow us to provide these critical community conversations. I am thrilled today to moderate this panel. One of my most favorite people in the world, or really some of my favorite people, but Rita P. Mitchell, we're so thrilled to have you, former board chair, a YWCA national board member, and someone that has been a fan or has been a really advocate for the YWCA for decades. So glad to have you. I'm going to start today because I want each of the panelists to introduce themselves and really to talk about how they have their professional and personal lives and the topic, and how their entree into the topic of women's financial empowerment. I'll start with you, Rita.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited to have this discussion. And so, again, I'm Rita Mitchell and President and CEO of Dream Bigger Now Today, which is a company I started 5 years ago. And the company, we basically help people to live their best lives by living their biggest dreams. But my background, my career was 40 years in financial services. And so in that career, I retired 5 years ago from First Horizon, which was First Tennessee Bank, and I was executive vice president and managed private client services for Middle Tennessee. And in my 40-year career, I also had my own insurance and securities brokerage firm for 11 and a half years. I ran an office for Edward Jones, and I was an investment advisor for 15 years of my career. So this is my bandwidth, and just what I would say I do personally as it relates to this topic is that I ensure that my daughter is empowered so that she makes great financial decisions, and she understands how to manage her money, how to build a portfolio, and how to create wealth and generational wealth, which is why I started this company 5 years ago, for her benefit. Secondly, I would say that I coach as part of what I do, and I get paid for coaching, but I also mentor young women who are in the beginning or in middle career, so that they understand that this gap, this equity gap that we're talking about, and they understand how to negotiate for their raise, for their promotion, for the next thing in that company, and what gap do they need to do, what do they need to bring to the table to get that done. And so I mentor on an ongoing basis. And then the last thing I would say I do personally is, because I divorced recently after 40 years of marriage, which was a horrific situation, but I also now lean into other women when appropriate as to the do's and don'ts as it relates to the financial ramifications of what that actually means to you and your assets and your go forward. So that's on the personal level. On the professional level, again, I mentioned coaching. So part of the executive and empowerment coaching is making sure people have a handle on their financial, success as well, because you can only be so successful if your finances, if you're not empowered to manage all that. And then I'm also, as Sharon mentioned, I am on the USA YWCA Board of Directors, where I chair development. And as development, what I do is help with policies, procedures, and fundraising for the YWCA USA, which supports our mission, which one of the pillars of the mission is to empower women. So that would be what I do on a professional basis. And so that's my story.
All right, Brynn, your organization is coming to Nashville and taking it by storm. You've been out there on the racial and social justice front, so we thank you very much. Tell us a little bit about your organization, yourself, and how you fit into this issue of women's financial empowerment.
Sure. I mean, it's hard to follow Rita. I think she's probably the most qualified person on this topic, maybe ever, definitely in Nashville. My name is Brynn Plummer, and I'm Vice President and Director of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion at AllianceBernstein. For anyone who doesn't know about AllianceBernstein, we're an asset management firm. That means we help people, families, organizations manage and organize their assets so that they don't lose value and ultimately can maximize their value. And so if you're newer to understanding that world, it is full of jargon, but to make it really simple, there's kind of 4 types of assets. There's cash, there's equity, so buying partial ownership into a company. There's bonds, which is loaning money to the government or a corporation so that you can get your money back and get interest on it. And then there's what's called alternative investments. So that's stuff like raw goods like gold or real estate, art even counts as an alternative investment. So we manage those accounts for very high net worth individuals, as well as nonprofits and universities who have endowments, and even a number of public employee pension and retirement funds. So, the California State Teachers Retirement Association, the New York State Employees Retirement System. So on the personal level, this is kind of what we do every day. We're very, very customer centric in how we approach this. We try to be really nimble. We're like a top 25 asset manager in the US, according to assets under management, but we are really, really small comparatively to a lot of our peers. So we have about 5,000 global employees, 1,100 of which are in Nashville. By comparison, Citi, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, these folks have 100K plus employees. So we can be a little more boutique. We're very entrepreneurial in that way. On a personal level, this is just like what I like to get my soapbox out and talk about on any given day. I did not grow up learning about this at all. And if you told me, I spent the vast majority of my career in public service, be it working as a teacher. I worked here at West End Middle School as a 6th grade English and social studies teacher, worked for Teach for America, Nashville, Memphis, and Chattanooga for a number of years. And then most recently, prior to joining AB, was at the Nashville Entrepreneur Center, helping women and people of color start businesses and access funding and that sort of thing. But because I didn't grow up learning about this, I feel like my career has led me to learn incrementally every time I've gotten a new job, every time I've met a new client or partner or funder. When I was on the nonprofit side, it allowed me to get exposed to it in a new and different way. And sometimes when I learned about it, I was angry. I was like, why am I just learning now that this is what compounding interest is? I'm 29 and I just learned that, back when I learned it back then. And so I feel personally like I'm on this mission to get back the things that I feel I didn't get in my early education, but I also don't want other people to make those same mistakes or to miss out on things that they could have. I speak from, I'm not on a bully pulpit telling people how to be perfect. Like I didn't start a retirement account until I was 31. So you're not alone, and there's no wrong time to start learning about this. So whether it's learning how to buy a house or business financing or navigating divorce, also been through a divorce, and it is a very tricky, difficult picture from a financial perspective, in addition to being really emotionally challenging. So this is something that I find I get asked about kind of informally in a lot of different ways, and I'm very public about it and open about it to anyone who wants to talk about it or wants to listen, kind of similar to Rita. So thank you for having me. I've not been able to talk about this so openly and in a forum just like this. So I really, really appreciate the opportunity.
Well, thank you. We're very, very thrilled to have you. And Vanessa Johnson, who I say is at the grassroots level of female empowerment. She is over both our Girls Inc. affiliate program as well as our Men Together. So she's there in lower school, middle school, and high school with our kids that are finally getting the advice or information they need so that they can have a better financial future. So Vanessa?
Hi, everyone. I'm so excited to be with these amazing women, and I am ready to learn from them, as I know all of you listening are too. I get to work with the kids of Nashville. So I'm the executive director of Girls Inc. And then I also oversee Men Together. And so today I'm going to specifically kind of sit in my Girls Inc. realm and talk about that work and how it connects to financial literacy. And when we work with our girls, we have our mission of inspiring girls to be strong, smart, and bold, but our vision is also powerful girls in an equitable society. And so when you think of that vision that we're reaching towards, this conversation is very important and very timely. We are in some uncertain times for our kids right now, and for, I mean, adults as well, but as they look for the future, there's a lot of potentially unexpected things that will come up. And how can we give them the tools and the resources they need to be able to navigate those times? So we try to empower our girls to recognize early that they have a say and they have control over their financial skills and literacies, as well as promote our girls to have a sense of economic justice. So we believe in giving our girls the tools to be as successful as possible, but we also understand there are systemic issues at play that we need to advocate for change to create that equitable society. So we want to promote our girls to have that sense as we advocate along with them, and then also give them the skills to develop over time so that they can feel confident and competent in their own independent economic success. So that is how that connects to our work with Girls Inc. Vanessa, as I come to this space, also comes with my mother. My mother is in this space with me because she raised me very much to think about finances. She grew up in a way where she learned that the way out for her was to be diligent with her resources and to learn how to take care of her finances to create that security and that independence for herself. So that was something since a young age my mother talked to me about. She worked with military families on helping them find financial security and navigate life when they exited. And so that's something that I would be remiss not to share, that comes to me in this space. As my mom talked about this to me forever, and she will talk to me about it this weekend. It happens every time we talk, and making sure that I'm being really smart with my finances. And then I also come as a mother of two. So I have two little kids, a 4-year-old and an almost 2-year-old. And that really compounds this issue. You're talking about divorce adds to this issue, having children. There's just all sorts of things that our personal lives come with us in this space that can make these issues even more challenging to navigate. And so that is a lens I come with as well. I'm so excited to learn from y'all and talk more. Thanks.
Okay. Now, most of you on the call understand the mission of the YW. Of course, it's eliminating racism, empowering women, promoting peace, justice, freedom, and dignity for all. Our largest program, of course, is our domestic violence services. And one of the things that we have to work on a daily basis is helping the women who come into the shelter understand that a key element of their success going forward is to have economic independence. And so we work very hard on what we call financial literacy. And I'll start with you, Rita. What is financial literacy? What is it? Why is this important? We have women that come in with literally the clothes on their back and their children, who may have never had a job, who have a job but never control their money. What is financial literacy? How does that work?
Well, it really is having the knowledge to make informed decisions about your money. And I mean, money's goes a lot of different ways, right? So it's informed decisions about budgeting. It's informed decisions about how you spend your money. It's informed decisions about why you buy insurance. It's informed decisions about retirement planning, estate planning. If you're on that end, it's informed decisions where, and to me, it's also the ownership of making that informed decision and not letting someone else say, I got you, you don't have to worry about this because I got this. I'll do the budget. I'll get this stuff. I mean, I've got you covered, and then we don't own the power of our own financial destiny. So it really is it's having the knowledge to make the best decision about the money and earned income that you're going to make over your life as a working machine, right? Or even the money that you might inherit. But having enough knowledge to make good decisions. That's what I think financial literacy is.
Yeah, and we address this in so many ways, and actually, from what you're saying, Rita, has to be related to the particular audience and the individuals that are seeking that. Because I know Brynn will go with you next. What is your perspective? You deal with some very high-end clientele. Give us that perspective.
Yeah, I just follow up and double click on everything that Rita said. And, I think part of why we see a gap for women starts kind of from a societal standpoint. Like Vanessa, what you mentioned of it's not just individual behavior, but it's also what are the things we're working against from a societal standpoint. And so I always like to start whenever I'm doing a presentation to a potential client or to our employees by thinking about the history of women even having access to own their financial future. So the Equal Credit Opportunity Act, we're celebrating the 50th anniversary of that this year. And it was the act that allowed in 1974 for women to get a credit card in their own name for the first time without a male co-signer. And so from a societal standpoint, we have always had women contributing to the household finances, particularly for women of color, and even for white women who might have been housewives or raising children. That is still labor, and it allowed for men to go to work and make money because someone was at home watching their kids. It just was unpaid and unrewarded and unvalued. And so women have always been part of a family's assets, but they've been completely shut out from being a part of the financial decision making at a bigger level. Like they can go to the grocery store, they can manage the grocery bills, they can balance a checkbook, they can send the bill to the power company, but when we're really talking about the big stuff, all of a sudden that's a man's duty. And I think it starts also from a societal standpoint with STEM education. We know we have a huge gap for STEM education and girls' interest in STEM, math, economics, science, starting in third grade. Those two where girls and boys are interested starts to diverge. So I think it goes all the way back to that. So we have this history of a very recent societal permission to even own your finances combined with kind of a lackluster STEM education that is certainly not appealing to girls. And so those two things collude. So that's kind of the background of our culture. And then when I think about the financial industry, it has overwhelmingly been run by men who have overwhelmingly been talking to other men, to Rita's point. Even before we got on the call, we were talking about this. So overwhelmingly, not only are men making decisions and having the conversations, men also decided that their experience was the normative experience. And so that leaves a lot of women out of the conversation. For an example that we were talking about before the call, we've had lots and lots of financial advisors talk about some of the experiences that they have with women clients who said, oh yeah, we left our last financial advisor because he would only talk to my husband and he wouldn't talk to me in the conversation that they have of why we get clients. But even today, 60 to 70% of married women are in the workforce, but they're not considered equal participants in the financial destiny of their households, which is something that I think is just, it's this cognitive dissonance that we live with. And then the last thing I'll say is like, when those things all collude, we have a society that doesn't teach girls to be valued in STEM and their perspectives to be valued in STEM and not be valued in finance. And then we have a society that says you're barely even legally able to access those things. I think women, a lot of times when they get into this world, feel shamed, blamed, alienated, confused, and it doesn't create the feelings that make you want to go back. There's no dopamine release. There's no endorphin release when you're learning about these things. You just feel like, God, I want to get away from that and I want to avoid it. And so I think those things are all, I don't blame any woman who doesn't have financial literacy because it's not a fun experience to become financially literate most of the time. And I think it's going to require society to change, and it's also going to require this industry to change. I'm hoping that this big wealth transfer that we're going to see in this generation, where women and the baby boomer generation are going to control more assets than men for the first time in US history, I'm hoping that we'll get some of this industry to wake up and see that you're leaving money on the table by not catering to women. But I really think we're going to live through that, like over the next 10 to 20 years, we're going to see that play out.
All right,
Can I
Vanessa?
add?
Go ahead.
Well,
Rita.
I want to add because what Brynn was saying about history, I want to add a couple of bookends to that because it is, in my opinion, a big underlying. It's the gorilla in the room, and so Brynn talked about the act that gave the right for women to have credit without a cosigner, right? That means you think about that. So you can't get a credit card, you can't get a mortgage, you can't get a bank loan without your husband or a man co-signing for you, no, regardless of your income. So that was in 1974. But if you go back to when women were even allowed to get a bank account was in 1960. And then the other law that it really comes into play is in the 1988 when women were allowed to now get a business loan. That didn't happen to 1988. So then, there are stats around this at this point. And so when you look at the stats, there are only 16% of women ages 45 and I get 40 to 65 who ever received any financial education. Because, you look at this block of women, I graduated from high school in 75. They just did the law in 74 saying I could maybe borrow some money. Okay, this is my generation. This is not that far away. Isn't that crazy?
I know.
And only 60% women have never talked to a financial advisor. So when you think about, and you're coming out of the chute, you had no rights. What could I possibly? Why would I be asking about money when I can't open a bank account? I can't without my husband or my brother or my son. Oh, you got to be a man to do this with me. I can't go buy property. And 20% of real estate, in all the real estate in the U.S., only 20% is owned by women. And that's the biggest asset on a balance sheet for people most of the way. So I'll stop there. I just wanted to, I know we're going to leave stats, but I think those stats are important as you frame up why women are behind in understanding about money and feeling powerful to do something with it.
Mm-hmm. And for many women, these disadvantages have been accumulating since childhood. And so when you think about some of the messages that our girls are receiving, when a girl is most likely hearing about financial conversations much later than boys. And when you talk about some of those messages, girls are being told to save and boys are being told to invest, and they're being encouraged to take more risks, where our girls are kind of more not getting to play in the field, so to speak. And so when you think about some of these stereotypes, we really have to disrupt these socialization patterns. That's very necessary. And so the younger we could start in trying, to Brynn's point, make financial literacy a little fun, is important, because you mentioned STEM. Those conversations a lot of times is also something that's been exclusionary to our girls. And so trying to compensate for those messages and letting our girls know that you can take risks, that you can be independent, you can take care of yourself, and that you can confidently trust yourself to make these choices. And so we really want to get in there and help our girls learn that they have this power and that they have these skills and that we can make it fun and that it opens up doors to their future. And so with Girls Inc., we try to make sure things are games and hands-on, but also they get to dream. And I think that's one piece that connects to this, and who doesn't enjoy dreaming? And so when you let girls imagine what their life could be and then help them realize the skills it takes to get there and give them those resources, that makes it more concrete for them and something that they're more willing to engage in. And so I really think that, us starting with elementary and middle and high, and then even now I have, when the girls graduate, they come back to us and are asking for support as they navigate that postgraduate life. So those are a couple of my thoughts, Sharon.
Yeah, and what you're doing, Vanessa, you're trying to get ahead of this because we already have the baggage, so to speak, of history. Rita, you spoke to that. There's so many headwinds, and it actually gets passed along, because if you think about it, you go a couple of generations, this person did not have a reason to want to know something. It had no relevance to them. So you go to the next generation, that was passed from their mothers to their mothers to their mothers. And then you have on top of that, the intersection of race in that. So you have female and Black students, Black and brown students, which are many of the students in our programs. And then now we get to the issue of the gender wage gap, which is a reality. And it's almost as if society is wanting to blame those who have had no rights for the situation that they end up in. There are numerous equal pay days that symbolize how a woman must work into a year to earn what men earned in the previous year. For white women, equal pay day is March 12th. Asian American women is April 30th, and Black women is July 9th. Hispanic women, equal pay day is October 30th. For Native Americans or our indigenous family is November 2nd. Brynn, in your opinion, why in 2024 is there still an inequity as far as the pay gap between women and men?
Sure. Well, I'll quote the Department of Labor because they put it really succinctly, and that's women's labor is unvalued and undervalued. Whether that's unpaid labor in their own households, or the domestic office work that they end up doing at work, or just the straight up functions of their jobs. They are undervalued and unvalued a lot of times by their employers. They're also, women tend to be more likely to work in lower paying jobs with fewer benefits. I think that starts even with women getting tracked or choosing college majors that generally tend to track to less earning careers or careers that are a little less formalized in their career progression. So I think it starts in high school, it starts in college again. We also see that there's a lot of stereotypes that are still at work in the workplace, like women are less likely to be seen as strategic. Women are less likely to be seen as problem solvers, even though if you know any woman of any acclaim or any clout whatsoever, she is an amazing problem solver. Any woman with children, any woman with a complex family situation, she is an amazing problem solver. We also know because our society doesn't value women writ large, we see that women most likely more than men have to take breaks from their career to take up some of this unpaid labor. So they have to take breaks from their career to do childcare, elder care, manage complex familial situations. They have to do those things because it's not expected for a man to do those things in our society. And then the last thing that I'll say is some of this also comes down to when women are earning the most in their career. So women tend to earn more in their 30s and 40s. That's their highest earning window in their 30s and 40s. Men tend to hit their highest earning decades in their 50s and 60s. And so women have about 20 years after their highest earning years where they're still kind of just languishing in the workforce when we know we could be extracting their value and their wisdom and they could be leading projects. But those are usually when they're having to take breaks for childcare, elder care, et cetera. But men, because they're not having those same types of things pulling them from the workforce, they are on this upward trajectory in terms of earning, and it just compounds year over year over year.
All right. Vanessa, let's go to you. We have this wage gap. You have these young girls coming up. What can we do to address it? So the girls that we are mentoring, training them to be strong, smart, and bold, what can we do to make up this ground? I think it has to go beyond just making things equal. We need some equity.
Absolutely. Well, my first thought is thinking of some of the lessons we do with our girls, and we do economic literacy and financial literacy, but we also do media literacy where we look at stereotypes and kind of break those down. And so we look at the messages we're receiving, we look at the options that are available to us. And one of the lessons we do is career charades. And we talk about, well, who do you normally see in this role? And do you see it to be a man or a woman? Is it someone who looks like you, someone who doesn't? And kind of breaking down those stereotypes. And then we talk about, well, how much does this role usually make? What is required for this role? And so really helping connect the dots to some of the roles that you're saying you see men in that field are high paying roles, and the connections you've been making to this is a role I see a woman in this field, and that tends to be a lower paying role because of the undervalued work of women. And so helping our girls realize that they have these other opportunities for them, giving them experiences to explore other things and to connect with women in the work field that maybe have unconventional jobs, have had unconventional paths, and help them know that there's a way to reach some of these goals and to reach that higher pay. We also think that the voices of our girls are powerful. Sharon, you witnessed that one time when we brought our girls into a lawmaker's office, and when they see 30 girls, it really makes them think, how is what I'm saying affecting young girls? And so making our girls realize that there's power in their voice, there's power in their experiences, and when they can stand up and adequately express what they want to see for this world, they are one step closer to it. And then that they have the support with us to help them get there. So those are some ways we connected. Also, I think sitting with our girls sometimes in those hard conversations, and that, this isn't right, and making sure that they know that this is a society that we exist in, and not letting them feel alone in it, so that they feel support and they feel like they have someone to talk to, because it is, I mean, we're all adult women here, and I think we're probably a little discouraged remembering those dates and remembering this history. And so letting them know that they're not alone are some ways that we do that.
Rita, I'm gonna ask you just a further to add on to that question. We do know that women are sometimes pushed into these lower wage jobs, and I want to get behind that. Why do you think that is the case? Why do you think that that women tend to, for instance, you go into a bank and you want a job, and someone tells a female they could be a teller, they tell the male they could be a bank officer.
Yeah.
And I've actually seen this occur at a bank here in Nashville.
Yeah. I mean, I think it still goes back to what we're talking about, the history of women not having, first of all, the power to work, and then the power to control the wages of the work, and then the power of what the work is, and all of that. And so, women, and I think it's still there, women are seen a partner to a man, and a man is seen as the breadwinner. And so I'm more likely to give the man, if there's a range of this job is this range, and I, as the hiring person, get to put a person in a range. And if the majority of the people that are hiring are men, I'm going to lean and probably give that man a higher salary possibly than the woman. And I think, and my first job came out of a management training program for a bank, and I was put in a management position, and it was it was not an easy road, but I did all this, and I was promotable and all this stuff, and I was really young, and then they wouldn't let me. I was in retail. And they wouldn't I couldn't post to, I did this job. That's not where I wanted to be. I wanted to be in the investment side of the house. They wouldn't let me leave. I mean, they were like, you're here, you're doing a good job. This is where you see your career. And so not only do you get put somewhere, but people put you in a funnel of controlling your career. Mm-hmm. And so at the end of the day, I made the decision because obviously my career was mapped out and I was winning too. I don't know what, it's crazy to go into sales so that I could control my own career, because I know going to the sales side is the revenue side of any business. And if I became a top salesperson, then I was in a position to say yes and no and control that was how I made my first decision to leave banking and do the rest of the stuff. And I ended up coming back around. So that's a piece there. The other thing I don't think that we are confident about is negotiating. I had a mentor call this morning with somebody, and we're talking about, once you get hired, then you get into the merit raise. So if everybody gets 3%, you get 3%, we get 3%, we all get 3%. But if I started at, my base was 50 and your base was 60 and we're doing the same job, then my 3% is bigger. And it's hard to jump into an accelerated place without quitting your job or having the skill and the confidence to negotiate in that job. And we as women don't feel confident to do that, and men do. Men do. I mean, men will tell you in a minute, well, I deserve this. And we don't even know for the most part that we're not getting the same money as my peer. Yep. I mean, normally you find that out by an accident, right? Did you know?
That's true. That's true.
I found that out. This was later when I was in sales and they were hiring another person, and they were doing on the copier with somebody's salary that they were hiring, and they were making more money. They were bringing this person in with more money, and somebody told me, I'm like, and I'm a top producer, and then they wanted to give me a higher goal than this person. And this is what I told them. I said, here's the deal. I just got this on the copier. I'm sure this is an accident, but here's the deal. Either you can pay me a bigger base or you can reduce my goal. They're gonna, you're gonna reduce my goal, you're gonna pay me a bigger base. You can decide what you're going to do, but I'm not going to support a person coming in here that's going to make base. But you see, you have to be confident to do that. And so that confidence, going back to what Vanessa's talking about, is that you, as a woman, you have to be confident to stand in your space of knowledge, experience, value. I mean, you have to own that value. And if you don't have enough of it, you got to go figure out how to get it. But at the end of the day, you've got to be able to negotiate that and manage up to that. I mean, it doesn't just happen in a day, but if you know you want to get here, how do you manage that in a performance review? How do you manage that in the system? Because there is a system, but that's what I think about all of this stuff. There's a system and we're walking into it, and you've got to be confident enough to know and have done your homework enough to know what should you be paid? What is the average salary that's being for this job? What is my next career move that I want to make? What do I need to get there to do that? And when I do that, I expect this is going to happen. We talked about this, right? When I get here, this is what's going to happen next. I mean, I'm going to get a promotion. Then what do I need to do to get that? I want to get to this salary thing. What do I need to get there? And then that inherently says, because if I don't, then I may have to think about some other decisions. And then you have that baked into the cake, and we don't do that as women.
And one of the most compelling things that you mentioned is something, you know, as people know, my career is as a lawyer in both government, for-profit most of the time, corporation that is, and now in the nonprofit world. But one thing that's absolutely certain is how men are viewed. I have literally, now this is in the dark days of corporations, hiring managers who got in a little bit of hot water for taking this view, actually offered higher positions or promotions or raises to men who were either getting married or having children. Those were two key elements. Well, you know, he's got a family, he's having another baby. And these were literally reasons that were justifying someone getting an increase. And I have never once in all those years in corporate America heard that used as a basis for giving a woman a raise. So that's something to really keep in mind. And this is, you know, this is recent history, but that is so real, as you're saying, Brent. It is really the way that it is viewed. And I think that men lean into that with other men because other men are very sympathetic to other men. They want other men to feel confident, successful. They're all hanging together, and it becomes a club-like atmosphere. You want him to be able to play well in the club, and you know that really helps you because he's, you know, he's successful, and the wives are together, and you want them to have that additional money. Let's go forward because each of you is a leader in your various roles, and also in previous careers. I'll start with you, Vanessa. A woman in leadership has their own issues as far as training, making understand. Now, Vanessa, you're a little bit different because you're in a female-centric organization. However, you're in a male-centric world. And in that world, what do you see as some of the challenges for women? You're training the next generation of female leaders. What challenges do you see for the women leaders as far as getting into that space and doing some of the things that Rita and Brynn and others have talked about? How do we train them to be the kind of person that has the confidence for that leadership to say, I'm doing this work and I want to have the opportunity to do more challenging work?
Yes, it's interesting how much, even in, like you mentioned, we're in a women's leadership, you know, organization, but we are still in the world that we're in. And so there are still experiences that can translate. And when I talk to our girls, one of the things that we talk about is assertive versus aggressive. I think a lot of us on this call probably have had an experience where, as a woman, us trying to speak our mind or speak up was taken as aggressive versus even though we were trying to be assertive. And so we talk about that and how sometimes passion can be misread if you are a woman or you have other identities at play that can be used against you. And so trying to we advocate for change, but we also talk about the state of where we are and how to navigate that space the best we can. And so talking to our girls about how to be assertive, how to present themselves in these spaces in a way that is professional and that gets the results that they want. We talk about interviewing, and we talk about some of the rights that they have, knowing that you are allowed to discuss what you make, and that there are some things that are historically told that you shouldn't discuss, but that has kept things, has been able to allow the system to continue as it is. And so letting them know that there are conversations you can have, there are skills that you can build to help prepare you. Also, mentorship, connecting someone to a mentor is so important. I have mentors in my life. I've connected to career coaching, and I always recommend those kind of relationships for our girls. Someone that you can talk through these things with and get advice on how to kind of set yourself up for the next step. But I also think imposter syndrome is something that I read a lot about, and that it's not actually this individual issue that, oh, I feel like an imposter, but that it has been created. It is what we are supposed to be feeling. That's what we are set up to feel, that we don't fit in this space, and that is not the truth. And so helping our girls recognize that they do deserve to be leaders as their authentic self, and that we just can help give them the tools to shine as their individual authentic self. So those are a couple of my thoughts.
Okay, Brynn, you're in a man's world. So how does that look? What do we do? How do we move forward from this place we seem to be stuck in, where women, the pay gap is there? It's as they say, it's a man's world.
Yeah, well, I've chosen to work in diversity, equity, and inclusion for most of my career, about the past 10 years. And it is a woman's world, kind of similar to what Vanessa's world is, a woman's world, and increasingly and usually a Black woman's world. Which has it's been kind of insulating in some ways. Like, I have a Black woman manager, a Black queer woman manager. I manage a Black queer woman. My colleague and peer is a Black woman. Like, we work with a very, very richly Black female team. But we're embedded in an organization that is not. I'm very lucky to be in an organization that is, probably, I think people, when I moved to finance, I had a lot of friends from the nonprofit world who were like, girl, are you ready for this? But I've never worked somewhere where people were so passionate about diversity and inclusion and committed to it. But I think, whereas in other companies, I was spending a lot of my time at work proving myself credible. Like, I remember having a really rough day at one of my past jobs, and going online and tweeting something like, the amount of work I could get done if I didn't have to prove to my colleagues that I'm not an idiot. And just so many Black and brown women responding to that, being like, oh my God, like, if the work was just about doing the work and not proving that I was qualified to do the work, then I could get so much shit done. Sorry, that's a bad word, excuse me. I could get so much done. And that was, but now I feel like where we're at now, I think we finally have a lot more male allies than we've ever had. I think particularly I've been really surprised to find so many men who are in the baby boomer generation, who are like, I saw my mom or my sister go through this and enter the workforce, and I've seen really horrible things in my life that I don't want my daughter or my nieces or my people I manage to go through. And so I'm starting to see that. And I think what I think can be helpful is what we do a lot here, is like, we have a lot of data analytical systems to help us ensure, like, how is our pay gap? How are we monitoring our pay gap? Is our pay gap narrowing? How's our pay gap between women? How's our pay gap between women and men, between people of color and white people, between women of color and the vast majority of the company? And so we have to hold ourselves as companies accountable to making sure that we are achieving equity. And it doesn't happen unless your company truly prioritizes it. Like, that data is available at all companies in some way, form, or fashion, but actually using it as a tool to understand how close are we getting to achieving parity is a whole nother story. And so now I think my work is more about, what is the structural, how do I marry, because every company now is saying they care about DEI. It is completely out of vogue to say you don't care about it. But how do we marry that with the actual structural investments to make sure that's happening? And so that's really where a lot of this lives. And it's also giving allies a new identity that is more attractive than being on the sidelines or being complacent or being an antagonist to progress. They have to feel really proud to stand up and be allies, to advocate and for sponsoring women to become senior vice presidents through our process that we have, where senior vice president has to have 5 nominations to move forward in the process. They have to feel proud, and it has to be a more attractive identity than doing nothing. And so I think that's the work we're doing now. How do we make it possible, attractive? There has to be a little bit of something in this for people. How do we make it powerful to be an ally and meaningful to be an ally in ways that we haven't really had that structural ability to do so in the past?
All right, in the book Cast, one of the statements made that was so profound and actually I related to the most, the author talks about not being given the benefit of the doubt. And that is sort of what you're speaking to, Brynn. When you have to come into a situation, whether it's being a person of color or whether it's being a female, not having the benefit of the doubt as a layer to the work that you're doing. Rita, you've broken so many barriers, been the first at so many things. You as a leader in a financial institution, let's talk some about the issues that women face in leadership in financial institutions from the perspective of moving forward so that they can empower not only themselves, but other women.
I mean, I think it's just difficult. I mean, if I go back, obviously in my career, I was the only woman in the beginning and only Black woman. And, so, all of those things in a financial services industry, I mean, it's still a white male dominated industry. And so I think it's really difficult for women now what Brynn is saying in a corporation we have support, maybe it's different in your world. But I think it's really difficult to move that needle without having a leader that's going to champion for you. Not be a mentor, be a champion. And
Right.
so I think, and when you think about it in terms of that, then I think if I was back in corporate America, that's how I would think about my career, is that I would love mentors, but who is a champion? Who is a person that is making things happen from diversity and inclusion? And, that was the last award I got from First Tennessee, was the first diversity and inclusion award the company ever gave out. And that was because I had the power to champion people and I hired the best talent. And when you remove all that, so I had Black men and women and everything. And then altogether, this group outperformed metrics of other similar groups. But that's the leadership of somebody else having enough credibility within the organization to say, I'm going to promote this person, or this person needs to have a different opportunity, or this person needs to have an experience so they can grow into another job. But I think it's difficult to do that in a corporate environment without having the buy-in of leadership above. It's just hard just with performance only to do that without having to step away, go and renegotiate, get a new job, circle back around. And then here I am at this level, and then we begin this thing here. So I don't know if that's answering the question. And I think that from the you need that kind of leader, but then you also need to, if you're the person that's trying to move in the system, to also be aware of how people are getting promoted, who they are, who are the decision makers, who are the gatekeepers, what is my lack of skill, what is promotion. It's more of ownership. It's ownership of you being in the funnel, and then connecting also to who in this company is fair and seems good and is a champion, or who else outside of the company that would help facilitate this journey. But in the financial institution world, I don't think much has changed. I don't think much has changed. I think that there are plenty of women who should be leading who are not, who have the experience and the wherewithal, but you talk about Vanessa, you're talking about the difference in assertive and aggression, right? There, you got to play that pretty close to the line. It's in that world, you have to raise your hand for an opportunity versus wait on somebody. And then you got to figure out how to do that. So I don't know if Sharon, if that's answering the question. I don't think much has changed in the real, as you move up on a senior level of executive leadership. I don't think much has changed. And it may be put in a different wrapper, but it's the same burrito. It's nothing really changed from that.
Yeah, and I think that what you're getting at is that for whatever reason, our society has failed to understand meritocracy. We're trying in many ways, there are advocates for it, but society has a hard time getting there. And one of the things Vanessa was talking about, even in the nonprofit world, I don't think it's by chance that so many women are drawn to nonprofit work, but yet it is very undervalued. And even women that I know who are in the for-profit world do not have an appreciation for paying. They just think, well, you should be doing this out of your heart. And there's a lot of heart to nonprofit world, but also it should be valued because you're really solving some of the most difficult issues of our society on low wages and low pay and low everything with few dollars. And that's always been troubling to me. And I think at the heart of that is this system of not valuing women's labor. It's a very, very important aspect of that because women tend to be drawn to the work, very good at the work, working very hard at the work. Now, there's something that we had pre to starting the conversation and somewhat was touched on in this conversation, and this is transitions. Because anyone that knows how women operate in society, you're juggling so many balls, and at the end of the day, I've seen so many women taking care of their parents, their husband's parents, their cousins' parents, their family's parents. They take care of everyone, children too. I mean, they take care of the whole family, the larger family, and they transition to different places in their lives. I'm going to start with you, Vanessa, because you're a mom, you're a wife, you're a sister. I want to talk about the different transitions and how women have to be trained and ready to handle all of those transitions.
Oh, that's such a big question. And I think with our girls, we're mapping out the story of their life a little bit and helping them get the tools to navigate each layer. And I think, the one that's closest to me, as I've mentioned and you re-highlighted, is that I have kids. And I think a lot of times when that becomes the next step in their life or it's happening, they may not realize the cost of that. And so right now, I'm going to go personal. I pay $32,400 in childcare a year. So I did the math.
Oh my God, how do we pay you?
Oh my goodness, that's a job.
I did the math. That's a $15.58 an hour full-time job. And so when you think of that, what do you have to make I have 2 kids. They're not infant. So if they were infants at this time, that rate would be higher. And so it's just all of these things that you maybe just don't know yet until you're in that phase of life and it's hitting you like a ton of bricks, sadly. And so you now know if I don't want to work and my kids need to go into childcare, I have to make X amount to even be able to do it. If I was being paid $16 an hour, which I've made that rate in my life, I would probably need to stay home. And so I just really think you have to play the numbers game and map it out with our kids. Our kids, we make budgets. We talk about the cost of renting or owning. And so, our girls play out a budget with their life with renting a place. Do you need a roommate? This is how much it costs. especially in Nashville right now. And so just really recognizing that, that there's when you're transitioning, a lot of our girls right now, they're thinking about they're graduating high school, what's about to happen once you get to college, all of these things you have to pay for. It's not just getting your tuition covered. There's all these additional costs that come with that. And then once you graduate college, it's walking them through every stage of their life and trying to give them the tools they need to be able to go through it. But again, I think, Rita, to your point about the champion, really the best thing we can do for them is build some of these tools, but then give them a champion for when they hit those phases in life, because we're not going to learn it all. Things are, changing all the time and unexpected things happen. So just also making sure they have a connection to support and a connection to someone who's in their corner, rallying for them, champion for them, will really take them far. And if we can create that community, that can make us stronger as we go through these transitions. Those very personal, but it's a lot. It's a lot. Yes.
It's real, and that
Okay.
really is just staggering. Okay, Rita?
I just want to say one thing because I know we're wrapping up, but
Yeah.
what Vanessa's saying is true. So you think about that decision, right? You got to make this much money to work. So then a lot of us don't. We like, well, it doesn't make sense. I'm gonna step out of my career, and I'm gonna stay home with the kids because it doesn't make any sense. So then when they get to the point where you can go back to the career, and then you step back into the career, then you're now on a bottom run. So now this is this big circle that's happening. So now, even though I was really qualified here and I was on a trajectory, well, I've been home 5 years or 3 years and I'm back. And so how much do you think they're going to pay me now as a starting salary? So then I start again, and then I'm in this merit raise program. But now, instead of me being promoted, I've been out of the workforce taking care of my kids. So see, you see that how that comes all the way back to full circle again in this wage gap.
And who's gonna do this? I mean, typically, especially when the women are already starting at lower wages. So if it's a two-parent household, that's the logical thing, not to mention the nurturing environment that a woman could give her children.
And it
Okay,
ultimately, it ultimately
go ahead,
harms.
no, go ahead, Vanessa.
It ultimately harms all of us because we're losing money because people are stepping away from the workforce, and we're there. It's about 2.6 billion that we lost due to insufficient childcare because of women stepping aside from the workforce or not being able to find a place for their kids to have childcare. And so I think that's also important, is it's not only, we talk about the patriarchy doesn't just harm women, it harms everybody. Racism harms everyone. And so connecting it to people that this isn't just a women's issue, this is harming all of us when we aren't having that thriving economy that we need.
Okay, Brynn?
I mean, I feel so grateful that I just have cats right now.
They cost too. I got
No,
one
it's
of
like
those
cat
too.
childcare is not a thing. But I'm so glad you said that number, because I do think this kind of almost goes back to Jennifer's question in the chat, which is how do we advocate for increased pay and increased benefits for women in the caring professions or in the professions where women are over concentrated in. I do think there is a disconnect between people who are setting budgets and people who are leaders with the lived realities of a lot of workers. And I say that as someone who's, I consider Vanessa, we're probably age peers, but there is a reality that you bring to this conversation that is awakening me to your reality. And so I think part of this is also helping me think about how do we have bi-directional conversations or multi-directional conversations when we're talking about pay, we're talking about benefits. There's some companies that have reverse mentorships where it's not about just the senior leaders getting to mentor the younger folks or earlier career people, but it's really about earlier career people mentoring the older folks and folks who are more along in their careers who, I imagine there's quite a few, in particular men, who may not have any idea about childcare costs. I read a study today that said something like 40% of women at any given time are experiencing significant pain at work or significant physical discomfort and still working because of menstruation, menopause, returning to work with childcare, or chronic pain, because we know that's under-addressed for women in general by the medical profession. And so do people who are in leadership know about managing chronic pain? Do they know those things that people experience that they bring to work? And so I keep thinking that's really on my mind as I'm leaving this conversation is, do we have a real meaningful empathy and not just passion or care or concern, but true understanding of the different experiences that people have that might govern their realities. And how can the people who are setting the agenda or the budget or whatever, how can they get closer to those realities, regardless of caring about them? Because let's assume they do. Can we get them closer to understanding the lived reality of the people that they are employing or hiring or bringing into their organizations?
And Brynn, I will say from my perspective, because our time has run, this has been a fabulous conversation, but I will say this on this singular issue of childcare, which is a female-centric issue. I have stressed to so many male leaders how they should go home and look at the value that was there. Because so many of my team, I was the only one that had children at home, and every last other one of those had a stay-at-home wife, quote unquote, and the value of that they should translate to that figure that Vanessa. So if you have a woman that's staying at home, you need to do that calculation because that's very significant. And we do need to value women's work. The work that women are presently doing in our society is so significant. And when you look at the moms, whether they're at the Weaver Center, whether they're in the corporate America, whether they're in government, wherever they are, nonprofit, we need to value women's work. And that's the work of the YWCA. We're seeking to empower women, and financial literacy, financial independence is so important. This has been, we could go on forever. The impact of this conversation is huge. It will be available on our site. If anyone wants to revisit this or send someone to it, because these conversations are very important. We have a short survey that we have as a reminder if anyone would like to give us feedback. But this has really been amazing, empowering event, and I thank all of you for participating. So thank you.